welcome back to another episode of Bitesize Mobility. Okay, so today we're going to introduce you to the 1990 and talk about the 1990. So a lot of people have seen this position, kind of sitting in a rough 1990 now, but people don't really understand why, and they don't understand how to set it up, and they don't understand how to modify the position to get the stretches or the loading into the target structures. So we're kind of going back to the real reasoning behind it. We know the first part of these is all about the lesson and the why. So the 1990 basically puts your front leg into external rotation and your back leg into internal rotation. So it's a very effective position for us to start to load into those movements or joint positions in the 1990. Why is internal and external rotation important? The reason we like to target rotation is it allows us to target the deepest structures in the hip first, which is the capsule. In a lot of other positions, even if I just kind of turn my leg like this, I'm not really targeting the capsule. I'm probably going to get a stretch into some of the overlying muscles and structures before I get deep enough to the capsule. But when I use pure rotation, I'm much more likely to be able to get that stretch deeper. So what exactly is the 90-90? The 90-90 refers to the position where you have a 90-degree angle in the front leg, 90 degrees between your two legs, and a 90-degree angle at the back leg. I'm going to turn a little bit so you can see it from a different view. So 90-degree angle at the front, 90-degree angle at the back, 90-degree angle in the back leg. One more time so you get the full experience. That is the 90-90 position, 90-degree angle in the back leg, 90-degree between the legs, and 90-degree angle in the front knee. That's the classic setup and the ideal position if we can get into it. Now, a lot of people will try that and be nowhere near it. In fact, the vast majority of people, from my experience, kind of in this position, can't even sit up, can't get into the position. Now, we know with all of these exercises, if you can't feel, if you are not aware of what structures are loading, you can't reinforce and drive intention. If you don't know what it feels like to feel the capsule stretch and load, there's no point in us putting force into it, because it's like closing our eyes and trying to hit a dartboard. We may not. We're smart with our training. We're going to find a way to build the awareness first, understand the exercise, practice it, and get better at setting it up so that when we train it, we know we're getting some good quality training and we're going to start to get some tangible results from it. So what we're going to do first of all is cover a few ways you can start to modify the 90-90 setup to make it work for you. So for a lot of people, if you're struggling with pure 90, you just come off the angles. So on my back leg, I'm coming down a little bit, slightly less bend in the knee. That would be full 90. So we're reducing the angles. And in the front leg, I've done the same. Now, for a lot of people, this modification is enough, and they're now able to still use the classic movements that we're going to use to get into position, but it's not so extreme that they don't get a training effect from using the kind of classic setups. We don't have to start blocking and stuff. If you can change these angles just a little bit and still get a result, that's the first thing that you want to try. But there's a lot of people that even with this, they can't get up. They're back in this position, they're over here. And it could be 90-90 is not for you if that's the case, or we could try some other little tricks in the setup. So I've got a few yoga blocks over here. These are kind of essential for trying to set up the 90. And the first thing that we do is we place one underneath the butt, and then I normally place a smaller one underneath the knee of the front leg, like so. Normally what that is going to do is decrease the amount of external rotation required in the front leg, but more importantly, is actually going to decrease the amount of abduction required in the back leg to get into a 90-90 setup. For a lot of people, it's actually this range here that is stopping them getting in to a 90-90. So by blocking up here, and for some of you, you might be double blocking, like so, okay, just under the butt on that side. This often creates a lovely, nice position where we can get into the 90-90. I can respect the angles, can get up, and I can still lean forward and apply all the same techniques that I'm going to go through in this session on how to stretch and load the capsules in the 90-90. But your first goal is to find out what you need to do in terms of modifications to try and get into your best possible 90. The other thing it's important to practice is this sliding out movement. Okay, this is creating hip abduction. A lot of people have more range than they think, but they're actually here, not realizing they actually have a little bit more range. So you have to drive that knee away, block up, try to get the leg as close to 90 as you can. You might want to adjust the angles a tiny bit. Here would be a great position for me to start training. The only caveat to using blocks is often I'm now too high to get some irradiation. So I would then actually use a couple of extra yoga blocks under my hands here to put me in a very commanding position if I'm doing more high threshold 90-90 training. So those are my preferred options for modifying the 90-90. We're going to assume that you've managed to set up and get into your best possible 90-90 position. What do you do when you get there? So with the 90-90, the front leg is in external rotation, and the goal is to get a stretch and a load into the posterior capsule right here. Now, the way we do this is by trying to get the angles as close to 90 as possible on both legs. So we're in our optimal 90 setup, and you're going to try and sit tall. So I'm going into a slight anterior pelvic tilt, trying to rotate my pelvis forward, sitting up as tall as possible. And the mistake a lot of people make is then starting to lean like this. I don't want to do that. I'm actually going to try to take my butt and pull my butt backwards. So I'm sliding my butt back along the floor while keeping my chest high. And already with that little movement, I feel a big stretch inside my butt cheek right here. I push through the floor with this hand. I'm just supporting with my right hand, elongating up, pulling my butt backwards until I find that stretch. You might need to do a little bit more anterior tilt. You might find you need to drive your chest further forward while trying to pull back. You might have to wiggle the angles a little bit. At some point, you're going to get into a position where you feel that. Once you get the sensation in that position, your goal is to try to increase it. So do I do more anterior tilt? What if I slide my butt back more? Drive my chest more? And your goal is to try to get into a position until you get a significant stretch into that area. And this is where the fun bit starts. We're going to hold it. Okay. So as this is a session just about how to set up and start to get into 90-90s and understanding it, we won't do the full stretch loading, but we'll just spend a minute here so you can start to understand it. In further sessions, we'll get into training in the 90-90, but for now, we're just going to spend a minute. Your goal is to maintain the stretch. So I'm sliding my butt back. Chest is forward, elongate through the top of my head. And again, if I could lean forward. Notice how I haven't changed my chest angle. If you're not feeling it, you could lean forward more. Notice how I don't change my spine angle. The lean comes from the hip. And I keep trying to slide my butt backwards, just up, like so. Lovely stretch into that capsule. Very, very significant, but not painful. Just a deep, deep stretch. So that is how you set up and get load and intention and stretch into the posterior capsule on the leg that's in external rotation. To do the same thing for the leg in internal rotation, we have to utilize, I'll do it this way so the receiver doesn't get in the way. We have to utilize this kind of a rocking motion backwards. So the goal is from my 90-90 position here, I'm going to take my sit bone and rock my sit bone back to the floor. Okay? The closer I can get my sit bone to the floor, the more I'm in internal rotation. Okay? So we're going to practice this rocking moving here, rock back. We rock back forward, where I take the front of the hip forward. Now my butt, my sit bone, rocks back down. I'll change views so you can see this. From here, the movement is up and forward, sit bone rolls back down. And what I'm trying to do is get my chest and my body over this target back leg. Now I'm quite mobile, so I've got quite a lot of movement there. For a lot of you, you might be thinking, yeah, there's no chance of that, okay? Which is fine, because from this position, you might just find that this is enough. That's it. That's all the internal rotation you have. And that's fine. That's where we're going to work. The key is trying to get a sensation here. Some people feel it back here. These are all the different parts of the capsule. And then trying to get a little bit of load and tension over it. So now I'm resting over this leg. I'm trying to shift my weight off the front one into the back one, and I'm trying to imagine driving my sit bone down. The further I get my chest forwards and over, so I'm pushing myself over, and it kind of feels like internal rotation loading feels like someone's trying to kind of spiral fracture your bone. It's horrible. It's a nasty feeling. I'm feeling it right up into here for me. It's not pleasant, but it's not painful. It just feels discomfort. And what we're going to do is just hold this now for a minute. And again, you might find that you need to lean back slightly. That's okay for this one, for internal rotation. You can just lean back. The most important thing is to get used to this kicking motion and start to feel internal rotation loading happening inside the capsule. In time, you might come up a little bit. In time, you might be up a little bit more, like so. And again, another cue that's really useful is this driving of the leg away. So I'm just going to try and drive that knee out a little bit and load. Perfect. So that's how we hold a stretch load into the capsule for internal rotation. Put my chest back up and forward. And what we're going to do is just load forward into external rotation. And again, it's all about feeling how quickly you can get into that position. If you needed to block up between the two, it's perfectly fine to block to get the internal rotation one as well. So again, I'll come back to a one block setup. This is okay for most people. Some people double block, like so. Okay. And then the key from here is making sure this is going out. So here, drive out as far as you can. If you needed to support with the other block here, that's fine. Up and back down. And that's the internal rotation load. Here is not internal rotation. This is hip abduction. That is putting internal rotation into my hip. And again, I feel it very strongly in here. I even feel it more with this block setup. So there could be some value for me kind of doing it as well. So don't be shy of using blocks, books, or cushions, whatever you've got to get into a position. Remember, if you can't feel where you're supposed to be feeling a target stretch or load, if that's the goal, you cannot drive reinforcement. So if we started to do more intense strength training here, if you're up here and can't feel anything, you're wasting your time. Proprioception, awareness before intention, reinforcement has to be the way. Okay, so again, just a few more switching. So I'm up here, I'm going to lean forward into external rotation. Because I'm on the blocks, I have to move much further to get that load into the capsule. Come back up, I'm going to rotate back and into here. So again, this is for you to explore. This is understanding 90-90. The goal of this session is by the end of today, end of this 15-minute session, you should be able to get a stretch into the right place on the capsule. If not, your job is to practice it until you can get a stretch into the right area. Once you can get a nice stretch, I feel it here, just hold it. A minute, you could do 2 minutes if you want. The key is being able to find it and feel it working. As we do more advanced 90-90 work through training with me, it's something that I love. We'll be able to much quicker get into a 90-90 and start to load. From here, we can look at isometric strengthening, pails, rails, passive range liftoffs, all kinds of cool stuff to really improve your mobility. But if you cannot feel it and you don't know how to load it from a stretch, from a basic setup perspective, there's no point. in doing any of that. So go practice this 1990 setup. It's very, very important. It's all about awareness and intention. Play. Don't copy me. Play in your own body to see where you're feeling it. Give this one some practice, and I'll catch you next time on Bite-Size Mobility.